Okay, so thanks for joining us.
Oh, wait.
Oh, wait. Vertical video?
We have.
Vertical video. I remember a guy saying never shoot vertical
I
video.
did start this off with vertical video. All right. See here.
Me personally, and a lot of the members of the Cripple community are finding it more and more exciting, so it gets a lot of traction. So just to clarify all the relationships here today, I'm Owen Guthrie, and I'm the president of the board of directors of the Ancient Island Land Trust. And I also work for the university for UAB Learning and Distance Education. And my colleague here, Sean Holland, also works for UAB Learning and Distance Education. And one of the things that's interesting, so you can see the historic channel. This is it up here, this real sinuous blue line. Oh, they cut it here, right over here by Water Wagon. They put this road in after they drained it. This road here was in the 50s, 60s. So this cuts the historic channel, and then it wound through here. When they put this road in the 90s, they cut it again, wound out here. So this piece is high and dry, and we'll see that what that looks like today. And then it used to wind through right here and out through all this stuff, so they cut it again and keep places roads. So there's a major culvert project we have going down here. We'll go see that one. And we're working on doing this connection here, and then so we're fixing this fish passage problem, fixing this fish passage problem, then we're going to fix this one, then we're going to put a weir here to redirect the water coming down the drain back into the channel, and we'll regain all that habitat versus this channel habitat, which is not as good.
So clarifying, above is still in the main channel, or where does it jump from the main channel to the drain?
So that's a complicated question because this is a big hill, right? This is Chena Ridge.
Right.
So all the groundwater comes down and hits the channel, the historic channel. And some of that stays in a little bit, but a lot of it, all the watershed out here, the 40-mile square watershed, comes into the drain and flows out the drain. So the vast majority of the water is put out the drain, but we do get some groundwater in this. So even when we reconnect this, you can see all this enclosed water here. It goes back like a mile, up around the corner. That will come down the new connected channel right when we put this culvert in next spring. So we'll get some fish activity in the way.
And we're going to be in class learning about the importance of groundwater. So one of the really fascinating dynamics of groundwater is that it, temperature-wise, is stable and reflects essentially the long-term average air temperature, which means in the summer it's really cold, but in the winter it's actually warm.
It's got me locked
right?
into
So it can
this
provide a thermal refugia,
I
actually a
should be
warm water
vertical.
refugia in the winter to avoid fish freezing, and systems actually freezing all the way to the bottom. It's a fascinating dynamic.
We've got people in the
Groundwater.
stream, so. Okay.
Good? Yep.
So we have our,
Oh yeah, totally
we're all
put
here?
the mats, yeah.
All right, well, I'm just going to take the mat. We'll just walk over just a little bit.
Right.
Yeah,
Whatever. We contributed some.
And I think we might be locked into a vertical stream. Otherwise, I have to create a new link.
That's fine.
Vertical video, boy. I love hypocrisy. See, can you shoot this? This is one of these issues of hydrocarbon and impervious.
Yeah, you can see that sheen pretty
Good
nice,
for your
actually.
boots.
Right there is the drain. Yeah. And if you peek over the back end of the winter behind that water wagon filter, there's an outlet. There's water wagon put there, so people will fill their water, in case they have to go, and it's right on the stream. And it just comes back, people walk through the stream.
Owen, can I see your phone for a second? I just want to see if it really is
You go to the link.
Yeah.
Video, vertical.
It tells me to rotate when I'm horizontal, but if that is working in the stream, then what I don't want is it to be vertical frame, but the video is 90 degrees.
Right. It's on its side right now.
Yeah. Okay. It's apparently we're locked into vertical.
Okay.
Live and learn.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, like I'm in an infinite loop watching what happened, but 10 seconds ago. That looks good. When you do full screen on your phone?
Okay. Maybe this is an appropriate application of vertical video.
We can do it.
And time becomes a loop.
Yeah.
We're gonna go around here, go across once we do a little bit of arm waving. Are you watching?
I'm on a 20-minute lag, or 20-second lag. Really slow.
Caitlin says it's working.
Hey Caitlin, welcome. Thanks for being here today.
Make sure we get a shot over by the sign there.
This one?
So this sums up a lot of what is lost with the ditch,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So you saw that squiggly sinuosity line,
Yep.
and you look up at this and it's just completely straight,
Yep.
high banks along each side.
Yeah. I showed you that slide yesterday of what this looked like in 1935. So that's been what, 65, 17, like 75, 83 years or something ish. I don't know, something in there. 80 some years. It hasn't really changed that much. It stayed pretty straight. And not great. Not a lot of structure, not a lot of, I mean, you guys will find out all about this stuff. But from over here, it's also very low. See how deep that guy is?
Yeah.
Do watch the road, don't get hit. I'm sure there's some liability.
Try our best.
Okay, so in a minute we're going to go over there where we've done some work. This is still showing you the conditions as we found it. But this is the historic channel that this road, Chena Ridge Road, is effectively damming. So all that groundwater that comes off the toe of Chena Ridge flows into this and just backs up here. And it's stagnant water that it backs up about a mile around the corner in a very sinuous channel. So the idea is put a culvert through here, drain this, and that'll restore the connectivity of the historic channel in this one piece. This culvert project is going to be funded by the Federal Highway Commission because that culvert over there, the culvert in the drain, is failing. And so if that one weren't failing, this wouldn't be happening because this is $1.5 million. But when that one started to fail, luckily I happened to call one day and say, hey, you know, we'd really love someday to fix this. And they said, well, as a matter of fact, that culvert's failing. If you want to fix this, that'd be a good time because we have the road shut down anyway. But they weren't willing to fix this thing. And I said, well, you know, the water that's impounded here, you notice the thickness of pavement here? It's like 2 feet thick. Because this road is settling, it's cracking, we'll walk across the median here in a minute, you can see it's all shifting. So our argument was, well, I think this water's causing damage. So they looked at it and said, yeah, but you know, the feds have to decide whether they're going to pay for it. And luckily, thankfully, the Federal Highway Commission said, yeah, this is one area, it's one project, it needs a culvert. So the feds are going to, and I say the federal government, the Department of Transportation is picking up this whole tab for this piece of the culverts. But there was part of the excavation work out of the right-of-way. They don't work outside the right-of-way. So the culvert would go nowhere. It would just go to dirt. So we raised money, and that's where the Fish and Wildlife Service came in. For several $100,000, they paid for the excavation to restore the channel on that side of things. We can go over there now. But last summer they had people out here surveying with boats because we had to find out where the channel is and figure out where to put the culvert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So once the culvert's in,
Yeah, so once the culvert's in, this is going to drain out and it's going to be this ugly, stinky mess for a little while. It's going to be very organic. And I bet it'll reseed with a lot of weeds and things, but then you have to worry about, okay, do you reseed it? What's your seed mix? Because there's a lot of invasives along the roadways here, and they'll just take that over.
Oh, this is all bird vetch?
Bird vetch, yeah. Yeah, and they'll just, colonize that crazy. So over here, we had to get a certified seed mix that had no invasives. It's a lot of people, a lot of permits, a lot of paperwork to get a project like this.
So some of these decisions about, okay, we want to restore it, so long term we think it's going to be good. In the short term, it's going to be really disruptive.
Yeah.
And so we're going to, on a grand scale, we'll talk about some of those things when, in cases like a major dam removal project. So in Washington State, the Elwha Dam removal project is essentially an ecosystem whole-wide restoration project. But those same sort of questions, knowing that if you take out a dam, you've got over 100 years of sediments that's laced with heavy metals, and the whole system's going to puke back to life. And so trying to balance short-term and long-term disruption, tricky. They're tricky things to balance. Yeah.
So as the land trust, from a land trust perspective, this 90-acre parcel was given to us by the developer who owns Sherwood Forest here. Very generous donation, 90 acres, one Christmas for financial reasons. He said, he's very conservation minded. He said, here you go. He also owns this piece and lives right above it. So we're very hopeful that someday the land trust will end up with this piece as well. And there's going to be, right here where we're standing, over here a little bit, a 16-foot diameter culvert underneath this road that's going to be put 40 feet down next spring. And it's going to have 4 or 6 feet of artificial stream substrate.
So not arched, but sunk way down with sediment.
Right, and the reason why it's not arched is our local DOT guys were not confident that it would be strong enough to hold this much burden. Right? So there's this negotiations going on between Fish and Wildlife and Fish and Game saying, hey, we'd love to see a bridge effectively. And them saying, we can't afford a bridge here. Then they say, well, we'd like to see a bridge culvert, like a box culvert or an arch culvert. And they say,
it's not strong enough.
Too much weight, too much depth, can't do it. We can put a huge round culvert in. So they did that, and that's wonderful, because that's going to 16 feet. It's going to be wide. Let's go across the park.
So, but real quick, is this connected? So can life access this from the so is it connected to the drain or totally disconnected?
That's a good question. It's sort of connected.
Sometime a year, maybe?
Well, there is at the other end of this like a 3-foot culvert that goes beyond Chena Ridge Spur Road over by their water wagon. And that goes up and it comes around and eventually doesn't really connect. The question is might there be fish in there? I don't know.
Certainly life.
There's stuff in there. Maybe blackfish.
Because exactly.
Yeah.
And those are the other trade-offs of restoring a habitat might favor one species in life history at the cost of another. And so
let's step across when we have a moment. See how this is failing? This has been doing this now for 25 years, and they just feed asphalt to it. You can see the thickness of it over here. I walk all the way out here to this wire. Careful, the terrain underneath the grass is very irregular. So this is
3.
okay. 3's great. Hey folks, hi online folks. Glad you're with us. If you have any questions, use the comment feature in the
right side
live stream on the right side. Ask any questions you want. I'm sure glad you're here. So this is a little quieter here. We can talk a little bit better and get away from that road. So where you're standing now was forest this May. This was just solid forest. Around the corner is historic channel, but it didn't come here. Remember, it was actually all the way out there where the road is. So they've destroyed that when they put in Chena Pump Road. So the culvert would have ended right here. The new culvert next spring, which was supposed to be this summer, would have ended right there. So we had to pay a contractor to excavate this and restore this channel. So there was a bunch of design work, landscape designers, fisheries biologists, hydrologists had to figure out what kind of design, because there's going to be a lot of flow. When this thing flows, that 12-foot culvert over there fills to the top, and it's like a hose coming out. You know, there's so much water coming out of this watershed that it's really high flow. So this has to be able to withstand that. So you see some heavy riprap there, or heavy boulders built into that bank. There's also some of these, like what's called wire logs or core logs, which are like straw-filled, heavy erosion-resistant bundles, basically. Those are fixed in the base there, and then you can see willows planted there, all along here. We had the Youth Conservation Corps came in, and they planted some alders up here. You see some of those around the pond. They're going to be coming in next spring to revegetate some of that stuff they didn't take as part of our contract. So the idea is, once it's reconnected, then there will be flow here. All the groundwater flow will come through here, around this corner, and reconnect up and flow through the old channel. Guys got any questions? We'll talk about it.
So the willows and the alder,
Yeah.
they weren't planted by people.
Yeah.
But over the course of however many years would that naturally
It would naturally come in. Yeah, and that's a great question too, because
expediting that process.
we're trying to speed it up a little bit. In a lot of cases, when you do stream rehabilitation work, you're turning the flow on immediately, right? You do some work, bam, the flow's got to get back in here, it's coming in. We're very fortunate in that we're probably not going to get full flow for 3 or 4 years in here because we got to do some of that upstream work. So by then, this stuff's going to be really revegetated, and it'll be able to take those kind of high flows really well.
But that poses a very important philosophical and even more important, like pragmatic question. Like things like, do you plant fish in a system that's not had fish for years? Do you stock it? Do you try to jumpstart it?
Right.
That's one point of view. The question then is, well, if you do stock it, what do you stock it with? Right? So, and some people would say, well, that's essentially introducing invasive species from some point of view. There's the other side of thinking about, well, you know, these ecosystems aren't dead batteries that you can jumpstart mechanically that way. But so all these philosophical butting up with the pragmatic.
So
these restoration projects are fascinating for
and
those reasons.
there's a lot of agencies involved with permitting this. So this includes Fish and Game, Fish and Wildlife, so State of Alaska Department of Fish and Game, Federal Fish and Wildlife Service, Army Corps of Engineers, Department of Environmental Conservation, Fairbanks Northstar floodplain stuff. So I think there's a significant amount of money and time just to get all the permits to do this. You can't just go doing stuff.
Yeah.
And it's complicated because some waterways are classified as anadromous waterways. This one isn't yet. Although it has salmon in it, it should be classified. But the fact that it's not allows us to do some of these restoration work before it's classified. As part of the work, the eventual goal is to de-water the ditch over there and put all that water here. So we have a waterway with low habitat value, we think, that we're going to be taking all that water and those fish and hopefully move them here, and hopefully it's better. That's the idea.
So said another way, in Alaska, streams that are known to have anadromous species get extra protection.
Right.
So if the ditch had anadromous species, wanting to take the water out of that ditch, that low quality, would have way extra permitting issues and all kinds of stuff. Right? And so there's actually an advantage in this case of not having it listed yet.
Right.
Maddie,
But
I think Maddie had a
yes,
Well,
Maddie.
because like all the culverts that we're doing in the Matsu Basin isn't because they're classified as anadromous that they actually were able to.
That's right.
So it's kind of funny that
Right.
here it's a completely different situation.
So, but eventually we really want this to be classified that way.
Yeah.
Because it's got, so Chinook salmon are here, that's one of the really important species for the federal sort of long-term strategic plan in the interior, and for all of us as Alaskans. That will affect the treatment of this watershed going forward once it gets classified as containing juvenile Chinook. It already has juvenile Chinook and chum in the drain, but once it gets classified that way, that will enable us to do more, and also affect upstream development and say, no, this isn't important. So around the corner toe of Chena Ridge here are a bunch of mining claims. big, hundreds of acres of mining permits right in the basin of Cripple Creek. How do those coexist with growing development, impacted watersheds? Those are questions that Fairbanks is going to have to resolve as the price of gold is really high. Yes.
So when did they start to regulate, like, digging a ditch like that? When did that start, that they had all the permits that you have to have? Because now it seems like a lot of paperwork to get something like this to work, and back then they could just dig a ditch and it wasn't a big deal because there was nobody who would...
Yep.
Manifest destiny.
So interestingly, that ditch was dug during the territorial days when Alaska wasn't even a state, right? In the 30s. So by then, at that point, economic interest trumped everything in the state of Alaska. Now, and your question about when, each of these agencies has gained in purview and gained in oversight over time. And even with this project, working with, say, the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, state agency, Department of Transportation says, hey, we're going to comply. I was at this meeting table. They say, don't worry, we're going to comply with the state of Alaska construction regulations for fish passage friendly things. And the Alaska fish biologist said, those are old. They're not effective. They're not even up to what we would like to see. Yes, okay, that's great, you're going to comply with those, but we'd really like to see better. The regulations just don't exist yet. So everything is moving forward, and those are political and economic struggles. Let's go around the corner here. Just
real quick, there was another, I think, follow-up online from someone that was asking. Essentially, I think the question was whether if we restore this and connect it, will the fish not come on their own? I think there might have been a question of whether there was plans to stock, and I think in here there's not plans of, and so I think the answer is if you build it and connect it, we know that fish will come.
We really hope they'll come.
They will.
They will. Yeah, and even now, there were some significant fish passage barriers. So last summer, a juvenile Chinook was trapped above that culvert, upstream of that culvert. This summer, one was trapped downstream of it. These are not good culverts for fish passage. They're very long, they're very dark, they're very high flow, and these are slow swimmers. That's what I gather.
Little.
Yeah, they're small, and the flow when it comes out of that thing, it's just like it's like swimming up a hose.
And there's not little pockets for them to hide in. It's one shot. You got to be able to go the entire way.
Not like you can do a little burst and rest, a little burst and rest. It's 150 feet or 130 feet of full-on.
No. Yeah, you probably could actually figure out the equivalence of what that would be for a person. You'd probably have to be a sprinter bolt or whatever for
and a lot of research. I've seen some great stuff out of University of Washington, in fact, of culvert diameter, how to put baffles within the culvert so that you create these little disturbances, and what interval do fish need them, and at what speed can fish swim, and it's all math and hydrology. It's a good stuff.
Got it.
Let's go around this way. So another aspect of this project this was kind of a nice little wetland area where we're standing now. Because of the way the downslope water came, it was dammed in by the road here, so this was a little pond. You can see sedges. It was created when they built the road, but in order to build this channel, we had to destroy it. And that's not, we didn't destroy all of it, we left a little bit, but it's drained.
Sure.
And that's an unfortunate consequence.
So one of the things Alaska doesn't have to deal with yet is that some of these restoration projects, other places, you have a habitat that's totally messed up, but an endangered species might be using it. So you're trying to restore it for some other endangered species, but at the same time, something that's listed is living in it. And so that can cause a major problem.
Around here it's all constructed. This was all earth. And where we're standing actually now was the historic channel. It actually came around this way. Kind of look around underneath our feet here, but they had to get rid of all this material. And we didn't want this creek ever to blast out and go through that bank back into the drain. So they built this wall. So this is an excavated mound, and at the base of it, right down here, all along this base, yesterday Mitch talked about root rot barriers. What they did is when they cleared this has big giant white spruce on it like these. They topped them about 30 feet up, cleaned up all the branches, pushed them over to get that root bundle at the bottom, and then laid them in a row down here at the base. and then filled in over them. So along the base of this is this root water barrier, because this is perceived to be likely at risk for erosion.
Sure.
Yeah. Because that water, to get it to come around, go that
Right.
way.
So we'll learn about this too in the river, sort of river ecology, morphology, this turn, right? So the outside bend is where
Yeah.
the deeper, more energy is coming, so it's slamming into this bank and eroding this bank and depositing sediment on the other bank where it's slower. So the natural tendency would be it's going to want to go out there.
Yeah.
So there's a trade-off, it sounds like, of trying to protect the road
Yep.
and do it in a way that is still fish-friendly.
So as this project over time, and we can see that it's successful and stuff, does it kind of set a template for like the rest of Alaska's?
You know, that's a good question. I think Alaska, in the past, and I'm not an expert in this is Mitch's area really, about fish habitat restoration. We're really kind of just starting to undo some of the problems that have been done in the past 100 years, basically. Will Chinook come in here again and thrive? Were they thriving before? I'm not sure we know. We can presume that drain is not as good as this was. So it's kind of a leap of faith to some extent. And that's what makes some opportunities for research really valuable. Because that'd be great to say, what is this fish abundance now? If we return it, how do they take advantage of it? Are there good things, bad things?
Yeah, and you talked about it, these cost-benefit analyses, or how do you show that it's worthwhile? Quickly that starts merging into the philosophical, and there are things that are really hard to quantify, right? So you can add it up, it's like, okay, we think we're going to gain X number of adult Chinook salmon by this project, how much is each one worth? And do it totally sort of instrumental value-wise versus what's the value of restoring processes in a watershed?
Yeah.
And the value of people being engaged and caring about nature and caring about how do you quantify that? You know it's important, but
Do you think stuff like this will help shift that value to like intrinsic value on the fish themselves, or?
I would kick it to Owen thinking about how
Yeah.
people have been engaged and starting to care about this. I think there's really clear evidence that people think on this scale. So things that are changing at a global scale are hard to comprehend, but in your watershed, you can wrap your head around doing some good in the watershed in which you live. And that then can change your way you interact bigger than yourself. So there's a lot of value.
We have the conversation with people that Chinook salmon live in Cripple Creek. This is Cripple Creek, that's the drain. They're like, salmon? Yes. They're here. So it's like they live right here in these houses, and there's a salmon stream right here flowing by Justice Store there. And that's when people kind of get that, they're like, whoa, you mean like big salmon? No, they're little guys, because that's where they need, but the big salmon go up the Chena, and then they lay their eggs, and the little guys come down, and they come in these side channels called off-channel refugia or something like that. And that's where they get bigger, and they need that kind of habitat. So to answer your question about values, one of the things we're working with another agency, the Park Service. They have a grant program where they help communities develop recreation plans for trails and parks. And this parcel has a lot of trails on it. It's 90 acres, but they're not very well laid out. It's trisected by this channel and the drain, so it needs some bridges and how to design those for winter use, snow machines, ATVs, skiers, joggers, dogs. This channel stream bank side, if you walk along it, we should just pop in there. It's a beautiful walk along the white spruce. And if there was a pedestrian path in there, you get away from the traffic noise.
Oh, it would be awesome.
It's amazing.
And that's what you could have those informational, things that are showing.
Yes, and we have some on the other end. Yeah,
Good.
yeah, and that's the thing, we're doing more of that. But so it's nonprofits working together. It's state agencies, federal agencies. It takes there's nobody who just comes in and says, boom, it's done. It's all these little people working, kind of figuring out. A lot of people unpaid, a lot of volunteers, a few agency people doing the science.
So speaking of that, I don't know if we've clarified timelines here. So there's work that's now underway.
Yeah.
I think you talked about in class that you've got before, during, after potential for trying to understand the effects.
Yeah.
Are we still in the before largely? Are we in the happening phase, or
We're absolutely in the before ecologically speaking.
Okay.
Because we haven't reconnected anything yet,
Okay.
really. We're in the middle of the reconnection phase in terms of money and projects. So of the 4 major projects that have to occur on Cripple Creek to get the major part of the lower end reconnected, 1 is completed this summer, mostly. This one is mostly completed this summer. It was supposed to have been completed this summer, but the state budget thing messed up some of the Department of Transportation highway dollars. That's going to be bid out and contracted and completed in the spring. So then 2 will be done by next spring. Then the next 2 we're already trying to find funding for. The gentleman you guys met with, Mitch, he said he's going to his agency folks for some money to be put aside next summer to start applying it to just start chipping away at that next project. So, you know, and meanwhile, we're working with Fairbanks Soil and Water Conservation. He's got a little bit of money he gives to them to do a youth conservation corps project out here. So they work out here, they come up with a plan, like junior high kids. We're working with Fish and Game for the permitting. We're working, and they do the minnow trapping on here, do some monitoring.
Good.
So,
Have they trapped the wetland on the other side? Do you know?
Yeah, they did trap that.
And do you remember?
I don't know what they found. I have to ask Mitch. I don't think they found anything, but I have to ask him. Yeah.
Well, so I'll just pose it to you all. So a fascinating think piece, and this is where, you know, hardcore statistics and that's going to come into play. Like, what would you need to measure, and how would you do it to show that there was an effect of this restoration project?
Right.
That's not a trivial question when you start
complicated.
thinking about control, replication,
Expensive.
time scales, right? And so these before periods are really important times to be, you know, you need good before data, right?
And oftentimes, you know, having the idea, like this, so this idea of reconnecting Cripple Creek predates me by 15 years on the land trust. It's an obvious idea, but it's money and partners and people and politics, and you know, DOT went through a phase politically where they weren't really interested in these kind of issues. They were building transportation infrastructure. They weren't attending to primarily some of these associated, you know, we can fix it. Yeah, water messes it up, we'll fix it. And I don't know all the politics there, but I know that that wasn't their emphasis. To your question?
Is there much bottom-up pressure in targeting choosing areas of restoration, mostly
Well,
top-down
and
age?
at least in my mind, the kind of control this is the ditch. So, like, how extensively has that been studied, like fishing and?
Well, they've been trapping it now for like 3 years, minnow trapping. This last year, they trapped 20 sites, I think 2 or 3 days a week, all summer long. For 15 weeks, something like that. That's a huge amount of effort. Yeah, and they got a lot of data.
And Mitch and Fish and Wildlife are keepers of said data?
Yes. Yeah. I think the data goes to him. I know he has access to it.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're right.
Is there any concern of, like, you mentioned, like, if it was listed as like a salmon stream, there would be a lot more issues. Is there any chance or that the ditch could get listed since there are salmon? Are there enough?
So it
not
comes to
so
those
great
relationships.
things?
So this is all. There's 2 levels going on. There are salmon there. It could be listed, but the partners know that would be counter to long-term interests.
Right.
So one of the gentlemen with Fish and Game said, let's list it. And Mitch said, and he said, oh yeah, you're right. You're right. No, we need to wait. Yeah. So, you know, it's making those conversations. Policy is like one layer, but then the other layer is the people in the field making the right decisions, working with the contractors here. You know, it's every little thing is stipulated in the contract as to exactly what's going to happen here. Exclusive Paving did the contract. They're doing the blame job over here right now. And it's really important for me to be down here very frequently while they're working to say, you know, this is good, this is not so great, can we fix that? Mitch, for instance, they thought root wad bundles, boom, 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 birch and spruce. And Mitch came in and said, no, you can't use birch, they rot.
Just rot away. Yep.
They just rot. Spruce don't rot, not the same anyway. They last 40 years longer or whatever. So, you know, it's that kind of knowledge that exists in people and communities.
So a question online, I think it was probably related to this project in particular, and then maybe more broadly, but is there more of a sense that the start of these restoration projects, is it driven by top-down agencies saying we ought to do this, or is it usually grassroots local communities saying, look, we want to fix it?
Right.
I have my guess, but maybe you want to speak towards that?
So I think there's two things going on there. I talked with Mitch about some of their restoration projects, and what will happen sometimes is there's a culvert that needs to be fixed or a road that's being built. Someone will go for a permit, And the agency will say, no, we're not doing this way again.
Correct.
This was messed up. We need to fix this right, and it's expensive, but you're gonna do it. That happens. That's effectively what's happening here, but in this case, it was driven by a phone call from a grassroots person saying, "Hey, what's going on? I heard this. Could this happen?" And a willing partner at DOT saying, "I don't know. Let's look into it and see what might happen." And that's a cultural shift in their agency that's been much more pro conservation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think so it's the intersection of a lot of those forces all at once.
Yeah.
For a lot of the dam removal projects
Yeah.
that are happening in the United States and increasingly elsewhere as well, it comes up when you have a 50-year licensing period.
Yeah.
You got to get your license again. The dam is crumbling. It's not worth very much money, and so you get these grassroots efforts to say, "Oh, buy the dam and take the dam out."
One of our big partners, actually, the partner that we've worked with the most to buy properties in the interior, is a partner called the Conservation Fund. They're the ones pulling the dam out of the Kootenai down by Anchorage, which is a big project, a lot of money, very interesting project.
That's got a lot of potential.
And driven by nonprofits, driven by agency folks, driven by Native corporations, a lot of partners. That's a really, really interesting project. Yeah.
Does pressure from like the community and stuff like that help to kind of push for those permits and stuff?
Having community support helps immeasurably. It's hard to quantify. We had a community gathering down at the pump house last spring, just to kind of get the pulse, let everybody know what's going on, let everybody know about the land trust. Everybody was super supportive. We did get a couple of negative letters about this project this summer. People didn't like the construction, scared the moose away. People are different perspectives on things, and communities are that way.
And this is a disruption.
It is.
It's incredibly disruptive.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's short term versus long term. So yes, it is disruptive, but in the long term, we're confident it's going to be worthwhile.
So as a board member of the land trust, I'm thinking long term. I'm thinking we hold this parcel in perpetuity. So these guys are like, "Oh, we cut the tree." Like, we prefer if you cut less trees, but I don't really care. I'd much rather see the channel go in, because that will be there. The trees, they'll come back. So, yes, it's going to take them 70 years or whatever, but they'll be there. They'll be all right. The channel, if it's not fixed, that's a problem. I mean, some people really hemmed and hawed about cutting this swath of trees through this conserved parcel. But for me, you need to get the water here. There's no other way to do it. And you see this channel is much higher. Let's step over here to the ditch. We'll look down, and then we'll go down to the next spot. Take a look behind you, see the height of that.
Totally inside. So did you spray the grass in? This was you guys?
Yeah.
Okay. And the logic there was to have a template to avoid having other stuff fall around?
Yeah. So these species here are all Alaska species as well. It was a fairly high dollar seed mix. Clean of all the exotic. I don't know what those green things are. They're probably something horrible.
Hard to keep them out.
Yeah.
I should get that mix on our yard.
Yeah.
So this is the drain.
This is the drain. It's actually running pretty full right now, but slow. It's just kind of sluggish here. You can see, compared to the sinuosity of Cripple Creek, this thing is pretty much a straight shot all the way out. And that affords just a lot more. You can see the trees, how the trees shade that channel. Well, on the other end, we'll walk it along the channel. It's a great space over there. Now, how much they shade that, and how much cover and foliage and trees and things on it. And this is pretty open. But this is still used by creatures. There's ducks down here, there's marten down there, beavers, fish. That's where the Chinook is trapped. So dewatering that, this is not going to be a really pretty thing for those folks who go down the road. I mean, that's a real community consequence, right? It's going to be dry, it's going to start to grow in, and it'll be used as an overflow. Like if we do get a really high flow up ahead, it'll overtop that weir, dump down here.
Part of the floodplain, I guess. Well, we'll also, one of the fascinating things we'll talk about some, so this is similar to these patterns of large-scale logging. So when you go down and cut all the trees next to the streams warm up. And so one of the fascinating patterns that people have shown over and over is that oftentimes the growth of the fish will actually go way up when you cut And so some folks will say, well, actually, the fish are bigger and they're growing faster. What's the problem? And so we'll look at some of those consequences. Because it's true, actually, by shading things, you can actually growth might be slower.
Right.
But we've already talked in class on that fast growth and being big is not always necessarily the best strategy. It can come at a cost.
Right. So, any other questions about the roof of it or anything? So that's the culvert that's failing. It's actually collapsing in the middle. And that's great for us.
Yep.
So next spring, it's supposed to happen this summer, it's going to happen next spring. They're going to shut off the road, excavate down, pull it out, put a new one in, come over here, excavate down, pull it out, put a new one in.
Yep. So there's no doubt for the people that live on this bottom end of Chena Ridge, that is a
gonna be a
pain in the ass.
Yeah, they can go around, but there was, they told me, I think it's 12,000 cars a day.
Oh, I hope that.
Wow.
Go across that.
Are the culverts going to be designed the same, or is this one going to be different than
This
I
is
think
gonna,
maybe we should talk about different
right.
culvert designs.
Good question. So we really wanted a much broader culvert over here, a bridge or arch culvert. They're just too expensive, and it was so deep in the road prism. What they call that, a road prism. You see how much material's on top of that?
Yeah.
That's just a ton of weight.
Yeah.
And those culverts aren't as strong as a circle. So this is going to be replaced with the same diameter circle, 12-foot diameter, and that's going to be a 16-foot. It's buried, so it's kind of like an arc. It's, the top 2/3 of the.
But it's still going to have the bottom part.
It will have the bottom part, but they're going to fill it with rocks, so it's going to be an artificial stream bed through the bottom. They're going to. So if here's the stream bed level, they're going to bury the culvert down into the stream bed so that the stream bed just flows right through the culvert, kind of like a bridge.
Okay.
That's the idea. Yeah. And you can, it's interesting, if you're interested in this, there's so many different, you start looking around of how to fix a culvert. There's culvert retrofits, there's companies that make sleeve liners that fit in them with structure in them and things.
Oh, these restoration projects are big
thing.
business.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, there's a whole economy around restoration. And the cynic would say, as soon as a big project goes in, you start planning on how to take it out, and there's a whole economy of people that are working to restore something. So
Mitch was telling me about
it's the RIC, it's the Restoration Industrial Complex.
Yeah. And for Fairbanks, that's, in troubled economic times, it's great to have this money coming in to fix problems. Salmon habitat's a good thing. Mitch was telling me about a case in Washington. I think it was half a mile of salmon habitat they restored. It was like $30 million because he had to buy property rights. So this was people's houses bordering on it. He had to buy easements along it. He had to, construct some culverts and things. It gets really expensive really quickly. Campbell Creek in Anchorage, I don't know if you need
Grew up on Campbell Creek.
Oh, okay.
It was in the backyard.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
I love
that's
it.
a great restoration
I love it.
story.
It's such an amazing
There's
little
salmon
creek.
in that thing again.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I grew up poaching salmon out of that creek like nobody's business.
Yeah.
Are we recording that?
It's live.
I mean, letting them go.
That's where you got your inspiration.
Yeah, exactly.
So is there a push, and I'm sorry if you mentioned this before, but is there a push to do more restoration stuff in the Fairbanks area? Because Anchorage, it seems to be getting going. Washington has been putting money into it for a long time now, but is the interior kind of moving towards these kind of projects?
So that's a great question, and Mitch would say absolutely. They're really working on the Lower Chena. And I know he works in 4 different types of projects, and I know that basically from May till now, he's just flat out. He's got crews, he's got teams working. That's not to say that there couldn't be more money, there couldn't be a lot more done. It's all expensive, but yes. And there's a lot more done that can be done outside the Chena drainage too, I know he does projects out in some of the villages, out western Alaska. You start looking at these road systems that go way across, and you don't think about it when you're driving to Anchorage or when you're driving to Valdez, but every one of those culvert crossings is potentially fish passage related, and a lot of them have been there for 50 years or 70 years, and they're not great.
Sorry, I'm just shading my
Okay, so this is one project area we had. We wrote a grant to fix a failing culvert down at the other end of this parcel. We can kind of break up now. We'll bring the live streamers with us. Sean and I will drive down to the other end. If you just go down Chena Pump, first major right-hand turn, you're going to pass a right. There's a gate that leads into this parcel. You guys are welcome to recreate in this parcel anytime you want. Take your dogs for a walk, enjoy. The next right goes to the transfer site.
Okay. Yep.
Just keep going straight. There's a bridge there that goes over Cripple Creek. We'll meet you at that.
So
bridge.
take Old Chena Road
Old
past
Chena
the
Ridge
transfer
Road.
station.
Yeah, and you'll see us. It's just about 100 yards off
Past
this
the
road.
transfer station.
Yeah. And if you basically just go straight down this
Yeah.
road, first major right, The transfer site's on your left. Just keep going straight. We'll be right
Beauty.
there.
Okay.
And we can take this way back. This is a good way to back. Yep.
Right.
Yep. Careful on the road. Don't get hurt.
Yeah.
Interview online folks have any questions, type them in. Thanks for staying with us. Hope you can see okay. That's a nice
Perfect light, actually.
Cripple Creek is amazing. That's another one that people don't appreciate.
Yep. More because we raise the water level a little bit, the water, and I'm listening to this, I'm wondering if we have an effect on that water level. It's a little higher than 5 water.
Have you been? You must mention how much heavy metal.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so that's another aspect of it is for, we paid consultants to come up from a little bit needs to come down probably. I like that picture of that giant Chinook on there. People get confused. Like, where is it?
We have big ones and we have little ones. I don't know why that's so hard. I don't think that way. No, I spent 4 years in Newfoundland and was here to keep standing in the estuary and you're catching them with your cod. The guy comes down and goes, what's that? That's a cod. Look, isn't that cod? Cod a big? I was like, well, you know, you can't have it big. I don't know why that's hard. But he's literally hunting the other.
Yeah, he knows.
He knows the big one.
Yeah. It's like, when you look at a law, they can ask, how old driver has to be before they turn into the
Eric, we're just muting the audio while we're in transit, since our audio is no longer important. We'll be back on in 5 minutes or so.
We're going to another location just about a quarter mile away, a third of a mile downstream, and you can find that location if you're on your computer. You can look at a map on interiorAKlandtrust.org. That's interiorAKlandtrust.org, and you can look at the Cripple Creek project. There's a bunch of maps there.
Or you could just Google transfer station, Chena Pump transfer station, right? And then look close by.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Eric. We're just want to make sure people aren't getting the background noise of us discussing this and that. So I'm going to mute it one more time.
Okay.
Go back.
Hey folks, welcome back. We're just pulling up here at the confluence of the drain and the ditch.
There's the transfer station.
Yeah, that's the dump. This is another location where we had a bunch of work done this summer. You okay on that door there? Push the button and push it hard. Oh, there you go.
That's
How do
good.
I do this? Is this a power one? Right?
No, you just kind of
Oh,
slide.
I just.
Super excited you guys came out today. Super excited you're joining us online. That's good. It's really fascinating to me. I mean, I grew up in this town. I was born here, and I never knew. I mean, I knew that people fished for kings and chums in the Chena, but it never really occurred to me that like these little creeks and things would have a role in that. We can go on down here.
Yeah.
So the reason why all this is bare dirt is because we had to clear down to the creek, because there were some problems with this culvert here. So again, it's that thing like you didn't really want to clear the trees, but in order to fix what was wrong with the culvert here, we had to. And what was wrong with this culvert is, you can see it's a smooth wall steel culvert. Very thick, it's like 3/4 of an inch thick. We had photos of this one yesterday. So this is Old Chena Ridge Road. The culvert, when it was installed in the 90s, they replaced an existing culvert. You okay, Sean? Okay. It was replaced an existing culvert in the 90s when they put in this neighborhood here. And they put in a stream bed through the culvert. They did a nice job making it fish passage friendly. However, water just washed all that right out because it's smooth on the bottom. There's nothing to hold that rock. If all else high flows, at high flow, that's full of water. Total, this whole thing is just full. So, very high flow, what happened was the toe of that culvert began to erode. And you end up with a pool here. A deep pool, very deep. And at very low water, it would actually be what they call perched. That is, there's a drop from the to the culvert down to the creek. And then the fish little guys can't make it up. So that's a fish passage barrier. So high flow, barrier, and also a perched culvert barrier. So how to fix it? That's the question. Ideally, we pull the culvert out and redo it because the culvert is too high in the stream bed. It needs to be down about 4 feet so it's wider, and it needs to be bigger too, incidentally. Or bridge would be really nice, but it's expensive. This is not a state maintained road. This is a borough road. Another financial thing, right? We're not going to get federal dollars to fix that. So because it's a borough road.
So sorry, this is drain.
Drain. This is actually both.
This the drain in the old channel? No, this is drip.
The old channel actually crosses the road over there.
Okay.
But the drain and the old channel have a confluence. We'll walk up there when we're done. We'll walk up here. They have a confluence just upstream from here.
Got it.
And so at this point, when we do our reconnect, this will be both.
Got it.
And actually, not horrible. I mean, it's starting to get a little sinuosity just from things that have been happening in it. So here was our strategy to fix this problem. Had a plunge pool, had high flow. We were going to put baffles in the channel, weld-in steel baffles. We still may do that, but it's very difficult to de-water this to get in there and weld the baffles in because of the high flows, and it's expensive. And we got like say $55,000 to do what we could do. We got a little more money. So what instead they decided to do was build a series of 3 rock weirs. So this was deep. So this is recent work here. We put in, I think, 100 and something yards of this big rock, you see, cubic yards. 1, 2, 3. And each one is successfully lower than the one before it. And they filled the interstitial space in between, raising the stream bed a little bit to where we can what's called backwater the culvert. So the water is a lot lower flow now through the base of the culvert.
Yeah.
Will it work?
And the idea is there's probably not enough power to move these rocks. They
We're
should
hoping.
stay put.
We're hoping. Yeah, the question is, what do you guys think? Is it going to work? You should come back next spring because it's very uncertain as to whether those rocks are still going to be there. I'm like, I really hope so. $55,000 worth of rocks. I hope it did it.
So it's not withstood. It hasn't gone through a breakup yet.
This is just done 3 weeks ago. This was finished September 1st, which is 22 days ago.
And the trees were dumped in on purpose?
Those trees fell down
Good.
before we did our work.
Good.
You can see it's calving there. The bank's calving.
Yep.
Yeah, no, they did that on their own. And
Yep.
what happened was there was actually right under those trees there, you can see there's a little bit of a mound. All the rock that was in that culvert, which was smaller stuff like this size, pushed all the way out to that. So the question is, are those rocks still going to be there? Yes.
Would there be a way to reinforce these rocks? Like meshing or anything to keep them sort of
Well,
in place?
it's a good question. The idea is they're big enough and they're angular enough they sort of lock in a little bit. It's not clear whether that's going to really work or not. I think what my goal to do is still this fall is to contact Greer Welding, who's a big steel chain contractor, and have them cut us out the baffles for that pipe right now. Just get them cut to the right diameter, right shape, right interval. And as soon as water flows get low enough, if they get low enough this fall, we'll just go ahead and weld them in. Then we're done. Like whatever happens, happens.
There might be ways to weld in water.
Yeah, you can underwater weld. Yeah, and we talked to Guy Greer and he said that he thought he could do that. So
Pretty awesome.
cold, it's running, I don't know.
And of course, there's trade-offs too. You say, well, how about you just stick some big boulders in the middle of the culvert, right? Well, you can't plug your culvert, so then it backs stuff up. And so there's all these trade-offs of, well, it would be obvious, just do that. Well, you can't do that because of something else. And
So that's a great, you brought that up. So original plan was to bring the base of the culvert level up 2 feet, have baffles with rock in between them. It was going to be artificial, it was going to be fantastic. However, remembered that you can't modify the floodplain by more than 12 inches without EPA permit. And that permit is like $30,000 to apply to submit the permit. And
so this is where ideas butt up against
the reality of permitting. Now, however, this culvert was installed with 18 inches of riprap in the bottom of it. So the question is, we only wanted to go to 24 inches. That's only 6 inches of modifications. So do we take the reading of the floodplain modification from the current as it stands, or from it was as built? I keep pushing on my contractor to say, we got to figure this out, the engineers, because they talk to the borough, and the borough's like, because they don't really care, they're just doing the paperwork, right? They don't really care. But, and really also, what's the risk, right? There's no houses on this creek upstream. We're not going to flood anybody out. But it's paperwork and it's regulations and it's real stuff. And so if possible, we can go in there and weld in some low baffles that don't affect floodplain because they're just bouncing the water around, and let it run. Or what's called a notched rear baffle, which is the baffle that goes across the bottom. So it's just like a little moon, a half moon of steel, about so high. Across the bottom was a gap in the middle, like a tooth, like a missing tooth. Move the teeth back and forth as it goes down, so the water goes down like that.
Place to hide behind and then zip around the corner.
Little shelter places they can come through. Yeah. So lots of interesting things going on here. This transfer site, the borough wants to expand, and they wanted to move it, I think 40 feet this way to where there's a 30-foot barrier between the creek edge and the chain link fence at the back of the transfer site. 30 feet of trees, the amount of garbage that's going on over there is not really sufficient.
And the bank looks like this, correct?
Like this.
So this,
So I've heard a lot about stream bank erosion in interior right now.
Okay.
What is like the estimated like buffer zone of what they think might be? Because I know that it's changing now.
It's changing. So
are you thinking permafrost
well,
stuff?
yeah, and just like how these banks are changing. Like, do they think they're just going to keep? Is it going to keep getting windier? Are they going to get wider and flatter like a lot of other rivers in the interior? What do they think is going to happen around here?
So depends who you ask. The drain is on its own slowly starting to become seamless. That's what it naturally wants to do. Just start to erode and push and have a natural channel like feel to it. The natural channel already is that way. But when we restore water to it, it's going to become again a living creek that starts to want to move. So yeah, it's going to do stuff.
But they don't have any estimation of like how many feet. I'm just thinking about permitting and regulations. That if it's only 30 feet away, if they estimate this much erosion.
So that's a really good question. So the borough said we're complying with state regulations that's 30 feet, blah, blah, blah. And that's some kind of state regulation for dumps or easements. But the development regulations for creeks is 60 feet. If you're building roads and things, it's 60 feet. The reality is 60 feet is not sufficient. I mean, really, it's not. 60 feet is like, not even near to the top of the hill. It's nothing. So they're in the process, but it's a political thing. And those kind of barriers in Alaska, that's money and property. And you say, we can't do anything within 60 feet of a creek. Somebody owns that, and they want to build there, and they want to put their driveway there or road there or whatever. So.
This is a really cool example of how that sinuosity evolves, right? So if things erode, trees fall in, backs up on one side, pushes it to the other side, slams into that bank, starts eroding the far bank, right? Things drop in. So that looks like chaos, but that is kind of that's what you want.
Is there ways to manipulate that to benefit?
You could dump some rocks in along, and all you gotta do is dump rocks in on one side a couple places, and you'll start to really get it going. It'll do it on its own.
And that's exactly the point, is you want to start the processes and get the processes working again that you don't have to keep manipulating it. It starts doing it itself.
Yeah. You're going to talk about vehicles and creeks. We no sooner pulled, they had one of those giant excavators here, it was sitting on this pad. Because they couldn't get across the creek, they did it all from here. They bring in a dump load of truck, rock, grab a load, move it over. No sooner did the excavator come out than somebody in their four-wheeler came down this bank, down there, you see the tracks there, went up there, drove around in here, the day. So we're gonna have to put some signage here saying, that's what Mitch and I were talking about yesterday, said, salmon live here, stay out of the creek please, something. Yeah. Yeah. So the interesting thing about this creek is that the mouth is kind of artificial, and the riverboat traffic, another barrier to fish passage is actually the mouth of this, because there's some sediment coming down it, or has been, and the way it flows into the Chena, it gets very broad and very thin. And when the riverboat Discovery goes by, it pulls that whole thing down, and that bank is just dry. And it has this really bad kind of suck effect right there, which is saying it's really not ideal for consistent flow.
And this is right at the confluence of
right,
the Chena?
yeah, if you're at the pump, next time you're at the pump house, just walk down, cross the lawn, by the gazebo. We have one of our land trust signs there, because it talks about restoration of Cripple Creek, it's there. Yeah. And you can see the mouth of Cripple Creek there. And when the big riverboat goes by, you'll see that whole mouth there. You just suck all the water out, and waves go up there and erode it.
Is there ways to put in maybe like retaining walls to help keep that?
Yeah, you can excavate it and put in some kind of structure. It's just money, and with ice in Alaska, it's hard on things. Yeah. And you want to make sure that you're not reducing the problem in addition to just trying to solve one. Let's step across here. We'll do the last visit. We're almost done.
Great.
To the kind of the forested side of things.
I mean, it is dump and struck. That's what I want.
Over here?
Yep.
No, but you can pull a house off.
Follow behind.
Back on land trust property here. That's borough property on the other side of the road there. This is land trust property. Last summer, one of the things about having a transfer site there is we get significant homeless camps built up in these woods here. Last summer, there was a camp built here in about 8 tents, blue tarp tents, real tents, wall tents, all kinds of things. And it took us most of the summer to get those folks out. So. And they were using it, of course, au naturel.
Yeah, yeah. Incredibly in size.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see the culvert from this end. So, a couple of interesting things about this spot. This used to be the bridge where the road is now. This used to be the road. That's why this bank is really kind of proud and leaps right across the other side. You can see those timbers there. This is where the bridge was. It washed out during the '64 flood.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There was actually someone, I was here the other day with an older gentleman, and he knew someone who lived on the hill there. This used to be the only way to get up on Chena. And they tried to drive across the bridge, and had water going over it, and they lost their car.
Wow.
Right here. And the rest of the bridge timber is over there in a big pile. You can see though that this bit of road, there's other bits of road to this parcel. It's got really great recreational opportunities, trails along the creek, trails along the ditch. And this has changed quite a bit. Even the work we've done, this used to be at least a foot lower, just kind of a trickle. So by even changing the hydrology there a little bit, this really changed this. And I don't know what that means for other fish species, predator species and things. You know, pike like slow moving water. Maybe a little more slow than that.
Just a question of whether they access from down below. Can they get in?
Can they get in? Yeah.
Good question.
So the people circle.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, those are always those issues of people bucket biology.
Yeah. So if you're interested, I encourage you to, we really haven't scratched the surface of all the different habitat diversity within Cripple Creek here. On the other end, you can walk along the creek, you can head up there this way. There's maps online. Kind of wander around. There's a lot going on in this little tiny area. Some of it's really beautiful. We didn't really touch it because it takes more than 5 minutes to walk to it. But walking along the creek itself, the historic channel, there's spruce trees in there like this big, and they're like 80 feet tall, and it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful place.
You can tell these trees are young.
These are young.
Young
yeah,
and
yeah,
small.
Yeah,
Yeah.
these are really young. All this stuff down here is really young. But it's it's that sinuous creek bed is there before people, or before white people here in the 19 and 2 or whatever. So it's really kind of a neat historic site. And you'll find house pits too. You can wander around the woods and someone's had a cabin there many years ago or something. Yeah.
Yep. That's another can be a constraint, right? The archaeological issues around restoration projects.
Yep.
It's like, it's a spiritual site, grave sites, all kinds of stuff that you can unearth while you're doing this stuff. Challenges.
So, and next spring, do check out these projects because they're going to be the major excavation work's going to happen there probably early June. Come by and visit this culvert, see if it's washed out the rock. If there's no rock in it, you know someone's mad.
Break up will be the test, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, breakup's going to be a test there. They may last 1 year, but not 2. It just depends. This thing, incidentally, the reason why I brought you over here is to show you this fills with ice. This whole valley, this will fill with ice to the top of that culvert. And that's a real fish passage problem too. Culverts cause all kinds of problems. Because ice is a barrier to fish if it's solid, and sometimes the water's flowing under it for a long ways, or through it, or on top of it.
Or there can be only one small passage tube that goes through it, creates these velocity barriers. We're gonna have a whole section that we'll talk about ice dynamics.
Off ice.
Off ice.
Yeah. This is a great test site. You'll see it'll just slowly over the winter just build up into where, because I had this great idea last spring. It's like, oh, they'll just come in and weld it's frozen. They'll come in and weld the baffles in the spring. And I came down here and it was full to the top with ice.
Correct.
I was like, no, that's not going to happen. It's 12 feet of ice there.
Yep. And then again, the timeline for when the old channel, if everything goes right, stars align, old channel will have flow and be connected.
So the goal is, they're going to reconnect for groundwater right away next spring.
Oh, wow.
So the old channel from that road down will have groundwater, significant amounts of groundwater all next summer as of next spring. I don't know if I'm pretty sure they'll probably get some fish in there because it flows a couple of gallons per second or a couple of gallons per minute.
Okay.
CFS.
CFS, cubic feet per. Yeah.
Two CFS, 3 CFS.
Yeah, sure.
Grayling for sure.
Yeah.
I would think. And it depends on rain. The next stage up, Mitch and I are going to try and get funding for as soon as possible. It's going to be about $1.5 million.
Okay.
So that's a big funding piece. That might be 2 years out, 2 years. Okay. Just kind of when we get that.
And was there sampling? Is there enough water in the channel as now, the old channel as now, that it was sampled for fish? So we have a sense of what was there before?
Yeah. And that's nothing.
Okay. Well, the zeros are important.
Actually, if you go up here just around the corner, you can see there's the divergence and it goes out into a meadow. That very lower bit, they sampled it like 3 places.
Yep.
That does have fish in it.
Yep.
Because it's fully watered.
Got it.
When you get up high enough to where it's dry and there's just some stagnant pools.
Yep. Okay. Oh, lots of opportunities.
Yep.
Cool. So where are we at for so is this largely what? Okay. Very good.
Yep.
Very good.
Yeah. You guys have any questions?
Any questions? Maybe I can check in online.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any new comments.
Okay.
But if anyone has questions, now's the time to type them in.
Cool. Online.
Thinking about the culvert, is there ways to maybe just drill through the culvert and have sections to keep the water out?
Yes, that culvert is so strong you cannot compromise its integrity, I don't think. Just a question of like, how do you get to it? Like I thought about that too. Like if you could just like have something just like random bolt into it or attached to it or something. Yeah, that's totally doable. I think welding might be easier. I don't know, either underwater welding or whatever. It's just that's one of those things where we just say this is what we want. Fix it, please. Yeah. I think you're right that there are some people in Alaska who can definitely fix that with welding, underwater welding.
But this is obviously so important if this is going to be, this could be a pinch point.
Yeah.
For the whole restoration of upstream.
Yep.
This is vital.
Yeah.
And
that's why we justify this. Is no matter whether or not we get that upper bit fixed, even the fish in the drain benefit from this.
Yeah.
So this was certainly priority. So that was the winning justification.
Jen Shriver has a question. She
Nice.
says,
Thanks,
are
Jen.
there culverts that do better under high ice, or are you guys on the frontier?
So that's a great question. Bridges are great. A lot of volume. Anytime you start to contrain that volume, and it's also covered in there, so that it's shaded. So you're going to get a lot more icing in that situation, and it's going to stay longer. That's the other thing is you want to get rid of it early in the spring. I'm sure there's people who have a lot to say about it. I don't know a lot about the subject. I'm learning as I go. But small culverts freeze solid, and that's a real problem. So the bigger, the broader, the more air that can get through there, the more light that can get in there, better. And one thing, I heard a funny thing that in some places they actually put lights inside culverts so the fish see the light to go through.
there's definitely some behavioral work that fish do not like swimming into dark places.
Yeah.
You can imagine just the idea of going into something that's dark. It could look like something's mouth, who knows. But there's been experimental tests of lit culverts versus unlit culverts. It seems like that is less of an issue than the velocity.
Okay.
That's pretty clear. I had thought about that too. It's like, oh, let's just put some LED lights in it. And it's usually velocity. All else being equal, they would choose to go through a lit culvert, but it's mostly flow.
So just for a matter for distances, this culvert is a 130-foot culvert, and I think it's beveled in the ends, and I think it's like 90 feet at the top. It's a long ways. The one up there, it's 130 feet in dark, end to end.
And for a fish that's 50 millimeters long, I mean, you start scaling to how long a distance that is for us.
It's like a mile through the dark.
Not trivial.
Scary with like monsters looking around.
Yeah. We've learned about those buggers.
So they put in a flow barrier here to try and seal things off a little bit. And while the guys were working, they saw a couple of fish in this size range. I'm not sure what they were. I told you. We talked about whitefish, maybe.
They could be whitefish. There are also, this time of year, the Salvelinus species, the char species, dollies, will be looking for places like this to spawn. So it could have been dollies. There's dollies in Goldstream. So that's totally possible. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's actually amazing. People overlook these little streams of their importance, and there can be exceedingly large fish in small streams spawning during certain times of year. If you go looking.
And grayling are like little tiny creek, just little nothing thing, grayling at that big, just hanging out.
Yep. Well, very good. I would love to get a group picture by the sign as we head up. That would be great.
Okay.
But I don't know. I don't know if we totally touched on Jen's final question of whether this is at the frontier of things in Alaska. I'm sure that this is pushing some of the challenges in terms of working in interior, working with ice dynamics. It probably is, I would guess, pushing a lot of those frontiers.
I think it's pushing the frontier. I think it's pushing the frontier for the community because you're building. Like, it's not like you come to this project and people say, "Oh yeah, we're restoring that there, of course."
Yeah.
It's like you're like, "What?
Yeah.
Salmon?
Yeah.
Here? Habitat? What?"
Yeah.
You know, it's like new first-time conversations for everyone. And you're like, Chinook?
Yeah.
You know, Cripple Creek?
Or even no, and it's like they just think this is it's a ditch. Just like don't even think about it.
Yeah, and they think, oh, yeah, sure, salmon spawn up in the Chinook State Rec area. That's where the salmon spawn.
And that's true.
It's true. But boy, that down-channel habitat is really important. And you have to get there somehow. You have to get there. And all these little tributaries. it's all cumulative.
Yep.
One more question from Jen. She
Yeah.
says,
Hi, Jen. Thanks.
how much community outreach is part of this work?
That's a great question. I think that's where, when you're in fisheries, like when I was in wildlife, so many people are interested in the science or the field work or the creatures themselves or fishing or hunting or whatever. And more than half the battle is people skills, working with people, talking to people, communicating with people, community outreach. So we just hired a wetlands coordinator person for the land trust. It's a part-time job, and one of their major skills for us is, can you manage a website? Can you keep it up to date? Can you manage a Facebook account? Are you good with people? Can you communicate well? Can you write well? Are you reasonably interactable in a face-to-face situation? Like mostly people skills, because that's really what we need them to do. Is if people come and talk to us and we're busy as a board member, we need them to be able to interact with people. We'd like to get the schools involved. We'd like to get other aspects of the community involved. We schedule events. We schedule potluck type things to communicate with people. And we really succeed or die, win or die, by community involvement. So I can't stress enough how important community outreach is. And I suck at it, basically. So.
Knowing that you suck at it, it's a good realization.
Yeah, this is, we're doing it here today, and this is, so for me, this will go in my report to the Fish and Wildlife Service, because they want us to do that kind of thing. They give us some money every year, and I'll say, yep. So we met, we worked out here with the soil and water conservation kids. I met with the university class out here. Yep. We talked about the projects we're doing. We had a community event at the, pump house earlier, and that's great for us. And you guys talk to people. You mentioned you were talking to one of your friends who.
Yeah,
like,
UAF alum who's the engineer on this project.
Yeah.
One of the engineers.
Yeah. Pretty neat. So those guys, it's pretty neat. You went to school for engineering.
Yes.
And now they're working on a fish passage project.
Yes. Yes.
Cool.
That would be one of the progressive degrees that should be offered, is a joint fisheries.
That's a good idea.
Design and engineering.
Yep.
And there's at least one undergrad I know of that is double majoring in engineering and fisheries, exactly along those lines. That's exactly what's needed.
And the people in the state who are those kinds of people who have experience, they're just like a handful, like they're tiny, like 3 or 4. Yeah. And we go talking about this. We should call I don't remember his name. Richard Cripple is the guy who works for Dow. He's our hydrologist in Anchorage. We should call Richard. There's a former guy from Fish and Wildlife Service who retired. They call him, even though he's retired, to talk to him about this project, because no one else knows what he knows. Yeah. Bill Rice, that's his name.
Oh,
Bill Rice.
Of course.
Bill Rice, yeah.
Mr. Fish Passage.
Mr. Fish Passage, right? So as a student, I think I was fortunate when I came through wildlife school. It was computers. If you knew anything about computers and wildlife, you had a job. That was it. You could. That was not a problem. Now that's maybe not quite the easy sell as it was then. I don't know, but fish passage, getting into some of these other kind of niche-y things, studying, learning about things where the money is, where the research is, where the projects are, where the community interest is.
Yep. Yeah, and I think it's also one of these where you're striking this balance, and you're not pitting ecology against progress and development. Is doing it right from the get-go, and in times we're trying to put it right where we've done it wrong. Yep. And so striking that balance, because there has to be development.
Has to be development, and as a land trust, you might think we're super conservation-minded. We're not. We work hand-in-hand with developers. Developers are our partners. The person who gave us this parcel is Fairbanks is one of their biggest developers. So, we're not anti-development at all. We realize that, if you want to develop a little bit of wetlands, you need to offset that somewhere else, and hey, we're here to make that as valuable as possible for the community. You can go ahead and develop some piece of willowy wet stuff down in South Van Horn, and we'll preserve something right along the Chena that people are going to enjoy every day. So
that helps keep this stuff conditioned to the people, to help condition them to think about this, so that this is also part of the planning too from the get-go. Not after, so there's all this money going in after it's all the beginning, so it kind of eliminates that.
Yeah, doing it right the first time. It's a lot better than fixing it later.
It is, It's necessarily slow, but
And on this particular parcel and all our parcels, we have a huge amount of community negative impacts. You know, four-wheelers in the spring, four-wheelers in the fall, campers, people having fires. You interact with the community, always doing also people who don't value this as what it is. So you're educating, you're working with the troopers. There's a lot going on. So.
Well, awesome.
Okay, let's totally sign.
Yeah, let's get
Okay.
a picture
All right.
by the sign and.
Cynthia says thank you for your time today.
Awesome.
So.
Hey,
Yeah,
Cynthia.
and thanks online,
Super.
Jen and Eric.
Thanks
and
you guys for showing up.
Cynthia
That's
online.
really awesome for us.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you made it. We'd like to hear
I get the feedback on
get
how
some
it went.
feedback if
Yeah,
it was
absolutely.
worth it or what you feel you missed.
Yeah,
Or,
how the connection was, if you could hear us,
Yeah,
things
absolutely.
like that.
So be in touch. Have a good rest of your
Enjoy
what
the
day is it?
weekend.
Saturday? Yeah,
Saturday.
definitely feel like a weekend.
Yeah.
Right.